Shalom Uvracha. I welcome you to Monday School. Turn with me, if you will, to Mark's Gospel, chapter 7. We're going to be looking at the passages found between verses 24 and 37. Before we read, would you join me in prayer? Gracious God, our Father who is in heaven, we know your name is holy. And it is because of your holiness, because of your power, because of your mercy and your grace, that if anything good has happened in our lives, it is because of you. We thank you for sending Christ into the world, Jesus Christ our Lord. We thank you that his Holy Spirit abides with us still, and that even when the world seems to be raging, and rage it does, that we can be assured that the presence of the Holy Spirit accompanies us, and that we need not fear, for you are with us. Would you now open our eyes, use the Spirit to teach us, energize our hearts, that we might receive that which you pour out and use it to your glory. For we ask it in Christ's name. Amen. Mark's Gospel, chapter 7. I'm just going to read straight through. There are basically two stories, one told after the other. They could be treated totally separately, but we're going to deal with both of them. Mark 7:24, Jesus left the place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. "First let the children eat all they want," he told her, "for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Lord," she replied, "even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "For such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found her child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of the Decapolis. There, some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, "Ephphatha," which means "be opened." At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. "He has done everything well," they said. "He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So here we have Jesus going into enemy territory, if you will. He is in what is clearly Gentile territory that is along the coast of the Mediterranean. Both Tyre and Sidon are on the Mediterranean. And they are not Jewish territory. We're not given any rationale for why he was there other than for this encounter. So he was in a house and did not want anyone to know it. He was not there to bring credit or notoriety to himself. That he was there to meet the needs of people. And not wanting anyone to know it, you may say, how can you have any influence if you don't want anybody to know that you're there? Well, word spreads. He could not keep his presence a secret. So, this woman who is a Gentile, when it says she is a Greek, it doesn't mean she's from Greece. It means she's a non-Jew. That's biblically, when you see Greek, it's not talking about a nationality. It's basically identifying somebody as not being a Jew. Two broad classifications of people in the New Testament. Jews and Greeks. And it's Jews and non-Jews. So she is not Jewish. But she seeks out Jesus because her little daughter was demonized. That she was possessed by an impure spirit. She came and she prostrated herself at Jesus' feet. So it is obvious that she is putting herself at his disposal. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. And so we can only imagine the emotion that is being poured out here as she comes into the presence of Jesus. And the reply of Jesus, if we're wired correctly, it should be rather startling, because the picture that we always get of the gentle Jesus who turns nobody away and says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." This Jesus seems pretty far off from the one that we read about here, who says, "First let the children eat all they want, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." So he is clearly saying that the Jews are the children and that non-Jews are the dogs. They are unclean, because dogs, you check the dietary laws and the Hebrew identification of animals, and dogs are unclean. So this was a sort of a left-handed swipe that it's not right to take the children's bread. So apparently he had a mission, he had an intention that somehow Jews would be benefited by his presence and his influence there. And this woman has come in, has found her way into his presence, and is begging for this favor. And he says it's not right. And of course, we read this, and it seems quite possible that if we put ourselves in the shoes of this woman, that our response might be something like to rise with indignation and to say something like, "Who are you calling a dog?" What? And I'm seeking your help, and you brush me off with an insult like this? But her response seems to, I hesitate to say catch Jesus off guard, but it seems to startle him. She says, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And she says, "From you, Lord, even the crumbs off your table are enough." Wow. Could we take a lesson from that? Sometimes we lean into this glorious gospel with its very rich and precious promises, and we want to cherry pick from among the best. And she says, "With you, the crumbs that fall from your table are more than enough." She wastes no time on this dog issue, but in fact embraces the imagery and says, "I don't mind being a dog if I can be a dog under your table." Whew. Then he told her, "For such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." And when she went home, she found her child resting peacefully, I imagine. It says lying on the bed. That instead of thrashing around in a demonic frenzy, when it says a little one, I can remember sitting in the rocking chair and having a little one fall asleep on my shoulder, and no sweeter sleep was there ever than a child sleeping like that. And I imagine that's how this little girl is. She has found peace through the power of a loving Savior. Seek out the crumbs, my friends. Seek out the crumbs. So, Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon. That's to the north. And it's kind of interesting. There are some people who read this and they say, Mark was obviously confused in his geography. He doesn't understand what's going on. No, Mark got it right. Is that we need to, instead of reinterpret what he's saying because it doesn't seem to make sense, we need to seek God's insight as to what's going on. And I think, you may join me in this or not, but he went from the vicinity of Tyre, went through Sidon, that's up north, down to the Sea of Galilee, and at this point, he's north of the Sea of Galilee. So going down, for those of you who, for whom north is up and south is down, well, this sort of fits, that he goes south to the Sea of Galilee, and then from there into the region of the Decapolis. And the Decapolis is a group of 10 cities that are sort of on the fringes. I don't think they're within Israel. If I recall correctly, they're also in Gentile territory. So Jesus, even though he uses the dog analogy, he has not forgotten that there are people other than Jews. And he also knows that in those, quote, Gentile cities, there are also going to be some Jews that are scattered there. So there, some people brought him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hands on them. So this man is deaf, but has somehow managed to talk in some manner. If you have ever been around somebody who has a profound hearing loss, but they have learned to speak, you can tell by the way they pronounce certain words, certain sounds, that they don't hear it the same way we hear it. And that was the case in this man, that he had somehow managed to learn how to communicate, but his communication was severely limited by his hearing loss. And so they begged Jesus to place hands on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd. Now, by the way, an intimate encounter with Jesus Christ calls for you to distance yourself from the crowd. Don't expect to find him in the throng. Expect to find him, to hear that still small voice with at least some degree of isolation. He takes the man away from the crowd, and he puts his fingers into the man's ears. So he's trying to communicate, and again, by touching him, there's this intimation of Jesus is wanting to connect on an intimate level with this man. And so he puts his fingers in his ears. Have you ever had anybody put their fingers in your ears? The only, I can think of babies were allowed that privilege. But for the most part, people don't put their fingers in other people's ears. And yet Jesus does this as a means of communication, apparently. We're going to deal with these. And then he spit and touched the man's tongue. Now, it's we're not given detail here, but I don't know if it's that he spit on the ground, exactly what's going on here, other than that he is also making a means of communication. We're going to deal not only with your ears, but with your ability to speak. He's trying to help this man mobilize his faith. How many times do we hear Jesus say, your faith has made you well? Rise and be healed. And this man is in a place where he's in the dark. He's in the empty place as far as sound is concerned. And so Jesus is breaking into the void, and he is preparing him for that moment in which Jesus says, Ephphatha, which means be opened. That Jesus is ripping the lid off of whatever has been keeping this man quiet. Whatever has been keeping him in the quiet. The equivalent, the sound equivalent of being in the dark. And at this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. I imagine there were some startled folk. And Jesus commanded them, apparently there are at least a few people around, and he commanded them not to tell anyone. But the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. And we find this going on in Mark's gospel, this secret. And the idea is not that Jesus is trying to hide, but that he is avoiding popularity. He is avoiding those people who would embrace him because of the neat things that he does. Come on, you've got to see this. That is not what he wants. That he does not want people saying, this is the kind of man that we can follow into battle against the Romans. He doesn't want that. He wants something more like Philip, who when he hears Jesus say, I saw you when you were sitting under the fig tree. And Philip says, you're the Messiah. You are God. This recognition that you have seen through all of all of my misdeeds, you have seen through all of the screens the walls that I have tried to erect to protect myself. You see me for who I am. I am defenseless in your sight, but I'll follow you anywhere. So he's looking for people who will follow, but not people who are following with an ulterior motive. And therefore, that there's this call for secrecy that and yet people keep talking about it. The more that he tries to quiet it down, the more it seems to spread. And the reason is because people were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear. and the mute speak. And in that verse right there, Mark is pulling together Genesis 1, where during creation, God does something and then says, and that's good. That's good. And he does that all the way through the 6 days of creation. And on the sixth day, he looks over it all and he says, it's very good. Mark seems to be referencing back to that. He has done everything well. Speaking of Jesus, it's as if they are recognizing that we're experiencing a new creation. We are getting the opportunity to be in the presence of one who says, let there be light, and there is light. And then when they say, he even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak, I want to remind you of these words from Isaiah 35, verse 5. We read, then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Sound familiar? And then shall the lame man leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. The new creation right here in front of us. And we are invited to participate. Sometimes you'll find yourself under the table looking for crumbs. But his crumbs, the crumbs from his table, are more than sufficient to meet your needs. We thank you, our Father, for the love of Christ that sometimes doesn't look exactly like we expect it to. But nevertheless, it's a grace that astounds us, that unstops our ears, that opens our eyes, that stirs our hearts. Would you do that in us? We ask it. We beg it. In Jesus' blessed name. Amen. Now, before I reach for that button, I'd like to remind you that the month of February is Black History Month, and that sometimes there are people who've been on the short end of the stick, like the woman in this story, an outsider. And one of the missions of the church is to fling open the doors and welcome in the outsiders. Outsiders take on every imaginable appearance, every imaginable cultural setting. We are invited into the mission field, the mission field that is right here, right here. You don't have to buy a plane ticket to get to the mission field. It's right in front of you. Go. And the blessings of Almighty God be upon you as you seek to do His will. Amen.